It will not stop the protests because the protests are quite unorganized grassroots protests. Lukashenko did a great job, under quotation marks, to suppress organization of any opposition movements in the past. And that, of course, now makes it more difficult to suppress protests who don't have a clear leader, who are very much about regional self-organization, so not only going on in the capital, but this kind of chopping off the leaders or the perceived leaders of the protests has been the tactic Lukashenko applies since 2 weeks now.
He's really resisting that pressure coming from the streets to resign or to even hold elections again. What is it that makes him so confident? I mean, what's maintaining him in power? Is it support from the military? Is it support from other countries?
Both. So he still has the support of the security forces, the military, but predominantly the police forces and the KGB, which is the secret service still called KGB in Belarus. He has the support of Russia, and there have been intensive negotiations between Moscow and Minsk in the past weeks, and it came out that Russia will not support any kind of transition without Lukashenko or replacing him, at least for now. And he is betting on that this support and harsh repression from the security forces will outlast the protesters. So he bets on that, given the level of repression, they will sooner or later lose interest in going to the streets. Things will be quiet, and then he's in power again. Well, he has been in power for 26 years, and he has been surrounded by yes-sayers all the time. So the idea of declining the offer of him staying on seems unthinkable for him, and he lives now quite in his world on his own, unfortunately.
OK, so he can count on the support of Russia, but what is that costing Lukashenko? What are Russians asking for in return, do you think?
First is the constitutional reform, as they call it. This will be an exercise that is behind the scenes, instigated by Russia. The second thing is, of course, deeper integration into the Union state, a common currency, common training, education for civil servants, even common employment schemes have been discussed. So Belarus will de facto sink into being a Russian oblast. On the military sphere, of course, this offers the use of Belarusian territory to a much greater extent than Russia was allowed to do so in the past. The integration in terms of security forces and military forces will, of course, continue, and hence Russia can have a foothold furthermore west, deeper into NATO's open flank on the east, and of course to pressure Ukraine. Cutting off that border or threatening from that border is far more easier than in the past, when Lukashenko tried to stay clear of all of these attempts to either pressure the Europeans or pressure Ukraine.
So considering all of this then, and the potential shift of the balance of power, shouldn't the EU be doing more in response? I mean, it says it's planning sanctions.
Yes, the EU, unfortunately, is always 1 or 2 weeks behind the curve. So what they are planning now would have been good if they've done so 2 weeks ago. Now we have a more internationalized situation due to the latent Russian support and the forthcoming Russian support on the security sector. And here, especially NATO should be called upon. I mean, so far, Lukashenko always stuck to arms control agreements and the Vienna document, being transparent. If the Russians get new military bases and extract Belarus as well from the sort of sphere of transparency, this will change the balance of forces on NATO's eastern flank. And at least now that the Russians should be made aware that this should have consequences, and they should not do so unpunished, and that NATO will or should reinforce their troops. Such a threat is probably one of the few things the Russians might listen to at this moment. And even though, of course, Europe would not like to execute such a thing, one should at least start to talk about it to make the Russians aware that they cannot do as they please.